Greetings, Natural We. I hope you all are well. This is Akua TJ, and I would just like to welcome you to Natural We's Community Hour of Power. Natural We Community is a nonprofit in which we put on programs, services, and events to heal, empower, progress, celebrate Black people, people of African descent, no matter where they may be. And we are just excited. We have a food bank, we have Zoom tutoring, a wellness program, and we have this platform, which is Community Hour of Power. Community Hour of Power is set to inform people of what we do. We are a myriad of people. We have talents and gifts and services, and basically whatever we need, we can find we can find we engaging in this and really having a heart for our people. I'm so excited to introduce our guest today. But before we do, just going to do a very quick breathing exercise. We have I Am Enough by Cooks Marie playing in the background. But I just invite you to get in a comfortable position. Um, you can close your eyes if you want to, or you can keep them open. You're going to take a breath out and take a breath in. You're going to take another breath out and another breath in. And you just want to keep going with that breathing pattern. As you think about, as you are breathing and seeing your breath and feeling your breath, just remember that you are enough. We are enough as a people, as a culture. God has breathed life into us, and we are divine. And God said we are good, and that we are enough. We have so much to offer. And so in times where we may feel down, in times where we may feel discouraged, can repeat to yourself that you are enough, that we are exactly where we are to be, and that we are engaging in practices to fully heal ourselves, to fully liberate ourselves, to operate in the full, authentic power that is God-breathed and God-inspired, that we come from a mighty line of ancestors who are freedom fighters, who are nurturers, who are prayer warriors, who gave hugs and cooked and ensured that this bloodline would stay alive. And we have that flowing through our veins. And so you are enough. You are enough. I am enough. And we are enough. Take another breath out. And another breath in. You're going to take one last breath out, just pushing out every negative thought, every negative feeling, every uneasiness, every tension is just coming out of your body. And one final breath in, breathing in love, breathing in light, breathing in positivity, in confidence, freedom, and the overwhelming capacity of knowing that you are fully capable of accomplishing every single goal, passion, and desire that has been purposed in you. When you are ready, go ahead and open your eyes. Want to thank Cooks Marie for this wonderful affirmation of I am enough. And so with that, we are going to jump right in. I am so excited for our guest today. Tashara Gavin-Moorehead is a member of the Dance Jazz Antiqua. It is a LA dance company. She has an MFA from CSLU Long Beach, and she has been a professional dance educator, choreographer, and artist for 13 years. Just want to thank Tashara for agreeing to be our guest. She is a wonderful dancer and engages in looking at dance as healing and how it can move the body to heal ourselves. And so with that, before we jump into the questions, just want to say welcome to Shara. Thank you for coming, and please go ahead and introduce yourself in your own way.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. What a lovely community concept and idea, especially for our people. We need the space. We need that type of energy in our healing. So, um, throughout my dance career, I have been blessed enough to travel not only domestically but also internationally, performing with predominantly African American dance companies, telling our stories and sharing our heritage with audiences across the globe. Those companies have been spread out. I've danced professionally in New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago prior to moving here in LA. And I'm originally from Virginia. And since being here in California, which I chose because it was warm, I was tired of those cold cities. I've been able to step into more of the choreographer for myself and like what does dance, how do I want to use dance and what do I want to offer the field? So for my MFA, I began to study how the Ngunzo Saba and movement could be paired in order to create a liberation practice or a liberation ritual specific to and designed for African Americans to center Afrocentric values as a way and means to know ourselves better, remember our true selves, and to have an overall sense of movement. I think we've known in the community in a roundabout way that music and dance have this important relationship, in the culture, Black culture. And what hope that I'm adding to the conversation is how we need to keep that in the forefront of our spiritual practices, that we need to prioritize movement as a way of becoming spiritually engaged with spirit. And it's not just for recreational purposes, it's not just for artistic pleasure, but there is an actual technological design in dance through specific movements that we can create a different neural pathway for ourselves. So
that's great. That's wonderful. So how did you get into dance? So why dance?
Why dance? As long as I can remember, I've always had a passion to move. Like, when you hear music, you're like, let's do it. And so my mom grew up being very physical. She was in sports and in ballet. And so she put me in ballet as like her tribute to her childhood. And that was at the age of 5. I began dancing ballet at the rec center. And I did talent shows in an elementary school, but it wasn't until the 4th grade that I began to decide that being a dancer was my goal. I was inspired by reading books about Catherine Dunham and Alvin Ailey, and even watching In the House, if anyone remembers that. In the House had Debbie Allen on it.
Yeah.
So I don't have the fame. Like my mom was like, oh, she's the one. I'm like, girl, no, she's on In the House. But yeah, things like that inspired me to want to keep dancing. I think the joy of dance has naturally existed, and I was telling someone else in another interview, the spiritual aspect of dance I was introduced to really early as well when I would go to church with my grandmother Mary Ann. She would catch the Holy Spirit, and that would take her dancing up and down the aisles. And she just had the church, you know, up. We were all looking at her and just looking at the power of movement. So yeah.
That's great. You took me back. I, grew up in church, and when spirit hits, it's a you kind of when you grow up in it, you kind of are like, when you're little, you might get a little scared, but but then as you get older, it's like, oh, that's just what we do. And
Yeah.
then as you get older, right, there becomes an appreciation, and a admiration, and just feeling blessed to be able to have examples of, like, knowing people are talking about being free to worship and dancing, and when they talk about, no, Fred Hammond, when the spirit of the Lord comes upon my heart, I will dance like David danced, like eventually, like, yeah, I will dance, right? And then, but they're like, oh, no, 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 like, but you see it, you're like, oh, whoa, it's a different type of dance. But
Right.
there's something so engaging about it and freeing. So you were talking about this liberation and how you engage the ritual as part of liberation for Black people, people of African descent. Can you just expound on that?
Yeah, I think one of the questions that I'm asking myself and asking my students, just to have a dialogue in general about liberation, is like, well, what are we freeing ourselves from? Right? Like, everyone's always saying, I want to be free. Like, that's so many song rhetorics right now. Like, I just want to feel free. And but we have to know where we started and like what type of captivity are we in, and to be able to identify that. So I think for what I've landed on thus far is that a majority of us of African descent, specifically living here in America, we're trying to escape a sort of mental captivity of, oppression, something minimizing your voice, your actions, and a sense of self. So if we can learn how to free that sort of psychological captivity, that will allow us to act in alignment with what we truly believe we are and uh, feel, then we will liberate ourselves. Because I think for a vast majority, liberation has happened because slavery has ended. But we know that that's not all that is being spoken about in captivity. There's more than just a physical, there's spiritual, there's a mental. And movement, I think, gets past having to do a talk sort of therapy, that you can bypass all the thoughts and the doubts and the worries of fear, and you can just get into movement. And so that's where I'm at with understanding for myself, like how much is required of that daily as a daily practice versus once a week versus a month. Like, how much would it inform my actions to be in alignment with my highest good and what truly matters in my heart? I think all of that is liberating. I think that's what people are trying to feel free in, is like to feel free in love. But I'm like, but what did you come from? And then we can work our way through that with movement.
Yeah, this, what did we come from, thinking about it, because, right, like this concept, right, of freedom, and then, but what does that mean when rubber meets the road, and how engaging it? And if it was if it was only about this physical bondage of enslavement, which many also argue that it's actually still happening when we think about, school to prison pipeline and just different ways in terms of systematic and environmental racism, things of that nature. What does it take to be able to live as free in one's mind, and how that community then engages and confronts with the world on a day-to-day level, and the amount of energy
Yeah.
it requires depending on where one's mental space is
Right.
and coming from there. So with that, and thinking about the time and how much movement needs to happen, I think this is it's always an interesting conversation for me, because when I think of movement,
Mhm.
dance is the furthest thing from my mind. I'm
Mhm.
like, let's hit the track, let's hit the basketball court and move. But it's different, in term, it's still different in engaging that music with the dance. So how do you then incorporate that theoretically into an applicable, this is how one frees themselves and frees the community through dance?
Wow. Yeah. I I'm still discovering and really amazed by what has already been placed from our ancestors, with uh, different African diaspora traditions of dance. I think of, for African Americans, we have the church in the Holy Spirit, and uh, being moved in that way. And then I also think, you have the Yoruba Orisha traditions, and you think of how that's helping in that demographic feel a sense of liberation, and the relationship to music, like how music is a vibration that is coming from either an instrument or a voice. And I think it's also interesting that the new age, so we're always talking about vibes, 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 and I'm like, but what does that mean, you all? Like, I asked my class, at one point, I'm like, do you realize what you were talking about when you're talking about vibes is the shortening of vibration? So what is vibrating? That means there's a sound coming from someplace, like that's your music. And I'm like, so when you listen to music, um, it's a sense you're in prayer because it's a vibe. I'm like, that's why you all walk into a room and you like a certain frequency. You're talking about the new age thing that nobody wants to talk about, or maybe it has been appropriated and dismantled in ways that it didn't need to be. But I'm like, we're still talking about frequency and vibration. And I'm like, so your music is your base, it's your core of how you're setting up um, yourself to be in a sort of frequency or alignment. So I'm like, your movement wants to be in alignment with that. And so I'm like, there's certain sounds that will produce a certain action, either that be joy externally and extending away from the body, or it'll be more internal and proximity will be closer to the body. And I'm like, all those choices are impacting one another, because when we're creating movement, we are also changing the frequency of the room, because we're changing the energy of the room. And I'm like, so it's always going to be that reciprocal energy of I give, and then I receive, then I give. And I'm like, that's what music and dance does. Somebody's making a sound, you do a movement, then you give it back, they make a sound based off what you're doing. I'm like, and then we just have a heartbeat. We have the lungs and the heart, it's all coordinating. And we're already doing it as a people. We already do that naturally, but it's not at the forefront of self care. It's not at the forefront of healing. like being at the cookout is healing. Being at the wedding is healing. But we don't know how to, or we're just beginning to maybe understand like why that is so important to have the cookout, to get together and be in a joyous communion and move in that way because it's built in us.
Yeah, so as I'm listening to you, one of the things that I'm thinking about is during the Middle Passage. As our ancestors were being carried over in the belly of the ship, so when they were coming out, it was dance, right, to exercise for profit. But when looking at what our people did, the dancing was being used to communicate. No, just like in a culture before imperialism, before enslavement, no, dance, music to communicate, so on and so forth. So even on the ships, even though Fulani and Hausa, Igbo, and everything, the dancing was still able to connect and communicate to be able to have insurrections and mutinies on the ships and things. So much to the point where dancing was uh crossing the feet was banned. And
Right.
as a dancer, I'm sure you know, like you got to cross your feet sometimes for don't ask
Yeah.
the pivot, the potty beret, whatever it is, I don't know, right? But it's banned. And so then you have this shuffling of the feet, so it changes to the ring shout. But
Yeah.
no matter what, there's dancing still in there. Thinking about Brazil and Belize with Calprete,
Yeah.
dancing is now being used to masquerade the fact that they're actually practicing fighting for insurrection. And so, not to downplay, right, the cookout, not to downplay the wedding, because dance is also joyous. There is a reason, there's a season there's a time for everything. But part of what I think I'm hearing you say is, what is the intentionality with our dance? And is it only being seen as, okay, when we all get together and just laugh and joke, and now everybody need to do one of them line dances, whether you're doing the cha-cha, the Cupid
Right.
shuffle, or the wobble, or the electric slide, whichever one you gonna do, where now is, this is how you look at it in terms of a literary practice for
Right.
freedom and thereby resistance.
Yeah.
And not resistance in a way where it is only resistance. And so it is only a reaction to white supremacy
Right.
and enslavement and imperialism, but we understand every single tool and power and strategy that is available for our people to heal.
Yes. I love that word strategy, that it's what has already been given to us, or what we've already inherited, has been powerful in aligning yourself with your actions. Um, I think people, I'm going back to your comment about like when you think of movement, you go to like basketball, football, maybe the sports side of it. But even those, have rhythm. You got to have rhythm to throw a ball or to dribble a ball. There's a rhythm in catching. And so even those movements are dynamic, but they don't maybe necessarily look at like the intentionality of it to be a spiritual practice. But I think that there's hope, well, I have hope that as soon as you start to put that intentionality in, that it is a prayer, that your movement is a prayer, whether it's joyous or, not a joyous occasion, that it's still happening. The force is with you, and you're creating something new in your language. I find it so I guess, for lack of better words, interesting that we we read all this stuff about, changing habit, right? Like people want to get out of bad habits, they wanna get into the gym, or they want to change their diet, they want to stop biting their nails, etc. I'm like, but all those things are actions. Everybody wants to change a habit of an action. I'm like, but nobody looks at, everybody is always trying to talk themselves out of the action. But I'm like, no, you need an opposite action to do. So as opposed to biting your nail, what is the other action? How do you affirm your nails versus chewing them off? What is at the roots? Movement is asking you to go deeper in, where is the action coming from? Is it coming from a place of fear? Is it coming from a place of fear? Or is it coming from a place of love? Because if I'm biting my nails, there's a nervous energy about it. There's a fear, a tension of something. But if I can come from and say, well, maybe every time I want to do bite, I look and I adore myself. And that becomes the action. And then maybe that becomes something bigger. But if we can stay in that action, this doesn't seem so appealing to us anymore, because this one's going to feel better because it's coming from a place of love. So I think that's also, with our ancestors through that middle passage, they said, okay, well, I'm not going to just do it for exercise. I know why we're doing it. We're doing it for this reason, to communicate. And inside of that, I think their bravery triumphed over their sorrows and their anxiety, I would imagine, from being taken from, their homeland, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we were talking about it like culturally,
Right.
right? And so
Stay on. She is not going to stay on. We're going to try her one more time.
your earring said it needs a new action.
Right?
It was trying to liberate itself from your ear.
She said, I'm gone. Okay. Okay, girl. It's going to take you off. But
You
yeah.
said free yourself. Free your mind.
Yeah.
Follow. I don't even remember what I was saying anymore.
I think you were going back to the middle passage. I think. Maybe. Frequencies.
I don't know, but we can go there. So in terms of thinking, it's interesting, right? On one hand, it's new, right? People thinking about what frequency will unlock the unconscious, what frequency will release tension. Well, so it's new, but it's not really new. It's just being appropriated for money. And so now there are those who are using it. But when it's looked at from a cultural standpoint and morals and values, and for people of African descent, it's not new, it's a return. So now we see Sankofa in action, right? And we being able to not only being able, but also continuing and returning practices that holistically heal ourselves. Now, you mentioned Yoruba and Orisha and thinking about it in those ways. Well, depending on the sound and the music, depended on the Orisha and what's happening. I was reading a book and the name has escaped me, but in it was a proverb, and it said, without music, spirit does not descend. Or I'm paraphrasing, our spirit descends with music. And it caught my attention, because also now taking it back to church. There was I remember growing up hearing about praise. The tribe of Judah sang an instrument before war. David, King David in the Bible, warrior, he was playing his harp, was dancing, right? There's all of these examples in the Bible, in Yoruba, in Zulu, in Shona, of our people having music in everything, and the intentionality and the frequency.
Yeah.
They're able to tell, we did a drum class, depending on the drum, depending on the sound, and depending on what was being communicated.
Yeah.
I forget the names of the drums right now, but the tone, the very aspect of it, and we can see that in our music. Even, there's a different frequency for hip hop. There's a different frequency for R&B. There's a reason why they say don't play hip hop when you already mad. It's just gonna amp you up even more. It's just gonna amp you up more. Don't go to Luda and 3 6 Mafia when you already mad. Just
Do it.
go to Teddy P and Otis Redding and
Right.
and Sam Cooke, and I'll try a little tenderness.
Yeah.
Soften, and how that changes the movement when talk about crumping and twerking and things, and all of these dances that if we continue to trace back, we
Yes.
see and go back, a different dance for a different thing, and how we're returning to that and really putting an emphasis on it. But what I especially have seen is the lyrics with that
Yeah.
emphasis, and with that, and how it now is all becoming in concert. Can you talk about that, what it means to you as a dancer?
The like the impact of lyrics inside of certain genres. Is that what you're asking?
All of it, yeah.
All of it. Okay. Well,
Whatever speaks to you.
I think I lyrics, there's a language of the music, like the music itself, without a verbal linguistic, you know, language or expression.
Okay.
So we have like three languages when we're inside of a club atmosphere. We have the movement language, we got the music language, and then we got the verbal language. And I think that oftentimes people will ignore the linguistic, language, the verbal language, because the beat is so hot, right? Like, beat is hot. I don't care what they saying. I was just listening to the beat. That's a good beat. And it's like, well, yes, we could do that. And, the movements could be fairly, if it's a younger person, the movement could be unprovocative, whatever that means, right? Um, but there is still power in the word because it's still a language. And I think that looking at the three of them, I think of them as equal, just like a sort of a trinity or mind, body, spirit. However, we think of the threes, like they're still all equal, they're still all talking to another. So I still find that it's valuable to know what it is that is being verbally said, and that we can't take the weight off of that. Like if you're if you're talking about killing someone but the beat is high, that's not gonna work. You're still conjuring up negativity. um the same way I talk, about heartbreak songs. I'm like, well, at what point do you want to continue to listen to that? Or the man done uh, did me wrong. I personally made a conscious choice to stop listening to music like that, regardless of the beat. There's one song that I have a hard time, like, I'm like, ooh, that beat still is nice. But like, no, what she talking about is her man like doing her wrong and she'll like stay there. And I'm like, ooh, that's not the message I need to be listening to, Um, it's powerful. It's all a prayer, it's all a prayer. And when you were talking about hip hop, I thought back to in one of my teacher trainings from Mafundala, they actually have a Sankofa gesture in their movement vocabulary, and like you actually make the symbol through your upper body.
I'm trying not to ask you to stand up and show us, but you know.
Yeah, I'll stand up. The but that Baba said that, you know, we need to be mindful if we do have live drumming, to know the rhythms, because he said like one day when he was teaching, he began to notice the room began to change, like the energy in the room began to change, and people started getting irritated and angry. And he even started getting irritated. He was like, "What is going on?" And then he's like, he went over to the drummers. He's like, "What I got playing?" They were playing a war rhythm pattern. It was for war. He's like, "Oh gosh." That's why everyone in this room is on 10, on edge.
They're ready to go. They're ready to go to war.
And that's what I think about hip hop. Like hip hop would be our equivalent of like, you ready to go to war, the battle, because there's battling in hip hop. You physically battle in street hip hop dance. That's a thing. And so I thought that was great that you were emphasizing that. Like, yeah, there's a time and place for each genre in your life. And the words will always matter because it's a part of that language bubble that we're creating. You know, we can speak things over our lives, but we can also move and act in alignment with the things that we're saying and believing, that I think is important.
I like that. I like that. And I really like how you were talking about, you know, making a conscious decision not to listen to certain songs. You know, I in some of my classes I talk about using music as therapy, you know, and so being able to identify emotions, and so a lot of times when I'm like, well what song is going to capture that you're angry right now, you know, or you're feeling frustrated right now, and you know, it might be Slap by Luda, and different you know, different things, but it's like it can't stay there.
Right.
Has to then have a process of moving through that session, and so using music to move through that session, but then what does that mean afterwards when you are consciously aware of the power that is within music, the power that is in dance and movement, and so making a conscious decision not to do something like, I love Saving All My Love for You. I love it. I love Whitney. But then one day I looked at the lyrics, I said, wait a minute.
Like, oh, this is what you're talking about? Right.
Nah. Right? No, I really enjoy you know, the songs, you know. Right. Kelly and Nelly Dilemma, and I was like, wait, Kelly was cheating.
Yes.
I can't, because we all know how we do.
Yeah.
We get stuck on a song and we gotta listen to it and sing it at the top of our lungs 30 times in a row,
you know,
over, and then wonder why we feel,
you know, I mean, that's how I feel about Creep by TLC. I love that song. So, yeah. But I'm like, oh, this, I'm not on the download. I'm not cheating on nobody. But that song, you're like, oh, yeah.
And so what does it do to our mindset when, if we have continuously listened to it, continuously, it then seems okay.
Then it seems okay.
It seems okay if presented in different situations and things like that. Like it could be real easy to, you know, we talked about sports. So one of our opening songs when I was playing ball was "We Ready" and "Never Scared." Well, there's there was probably a reason why I didn't really care about throwing the elbow down low if I knew that the refs couldn't see me and I was mad at an opponent.
Right.
Because I was ready and I was never scared, so let's go.
No.
Right? And how we have to be intentional with what we are feeding our spirit and feeding our mind. And, you know, it all plays a role. We've seen our aunts and uncles who, when they dancing at the barbecue or in the kitchen, the food tastes better when whoever was cooking was happy or doing the hymn instead of heartbreak. We've done it. Like aunties, it wasn't on point the way it normally is. They all right? Well, that heartbreak just was settled in the food.
In the food.
So the soul food was sad today. We need to be able to think about that in the movements and everything.
Yes, that is so true. That everything, our actions and what we decide to be conscious about starts to shape our lives. And I do think that, again, there's a time and a place for everything. If we are conscious and we just understand, like, oh, okay, this Creep by TLC is talking about this, but I at least understand that, and I'm not going to, there's a certain line of wall that I'm not going to participate in. When it just starts to go through the subconscious is when we usually start to get issues, because then people don't realize how they formed the habit to begin with.
Right.
Like biting the nails is an unconscious action of nervousness. But if I'm conscious about it, then I can make a different choice. And I think that's a lot of which in dance is important. Like you have to be aware of where you're putting your body in space. And then which means you have to be aware of how it feels. Are you tight? Is it sore? Does it reach very far? And I did not do the Sankofa, so I want to be able to do
I was going to bring it back to you.
Right, the Sankofa arms. You could do one, or you could do it up high. And you do the.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing and showing.
Oh.
That is great. So thank you for this as we begin to wrap up. What as you all know, naturally, this is a pre-recorded, so you never know what time it is when we are actually recording this, but we're gonna be a little bit transparent. It is like almost 10:30 at night because we have busy schedules. So that's why we're laughing. We just saw the time because we were both like, wait a minute, definitely have work tomorrow. But this has been such a fun conversation and I thoroughly enjoy it. So moving forward, where do you see yourself going as it relates to engaging in, I'm gonna just call it liberatory dance and mindful dance, as it relates to engaging people of African descent in healing practices through movement, through dance in a way that that impacts their life for the better?
My hope, my affirming goal or intention is to continue to do the work myself. So I have to hold myself accountable for doing the practice daily, weekly, monthly, treating it like oiling your scalp and brushing your teeth, it's a maintenance thing, not a one-time deal, that it's maintaining the spirit. And from whatever I discover, being able to share that with others through actual engagement in the community and in dancing, I think, whether that be through conventions, holding my own workshops, teaching it through whatever K through 12 or at the university level, that it's important that we all get access to a different way of viewing what is happening in our uh, African people, in ourselves. So that is that is the goal. Continue to do the work and give it out.
That is wonderful. Thank you so, so much. And yes, continue to do the work. We all at Natural, we encourage anyone who is listening, who is part of our community, watching this. Um, it's a daily thing. It is a lifestyle when we talk about healing ourselves, liberating ourselves, and being our best selves, and engaging in practices that are great for ourselves and the community. So we encourage you as you do the work. We are excited to see what comes from it. When you are ready to put on workshops and things, please let Natural We know about it so we can support, and also participate in things of that nature. Thank you to all of our watchers who watched Naturally Community Hour of Power. We are grateful for you. You can find more information in the description and our bio. And remember that you are more than well. I am more than well. Together, we are more than well, and we are able to impact our community and do great, great things for ourselves individually and as a community. And we will always be more than well. Take care.